Well, greetings, Series 7 test takers. This is Dean Tenney, aka Series 7 Guru, coming to you from my studio here in fabulous Las Vegas. I had a couple people from the Academy tell other test takers that they had to calculate yield to maturity. People run into a question like I have on the screen, and they say, Dean, you told me I wouldn't have to mess with yield to maturity or yield to call or calculate it. I say, that's indeed what I did tell you, and that is true. They said, well, how do you explain a question like this? I said, well, as you recall, I told you don't have to have the calculation, but you do have to have a general understanding of a relationship in yield and prices. So here it looks like they're asking you to calculate yield to call, or I could ask you the same kind of question and say, what is yield to maturity? But if you take a strategic pause, a deep breath, and think about it, you could say, well, wait a minute. Dean told me I wasn't going to have to do that. So why did Dean lie to me? Or you could say, is there some kind of a hack I can perform where I'm not going to have to do the actual math? And so you say, okay, well, let me get going on what I can get going on. I should have the teeter-totter or seesaw. And I should be able on the teeter-totter or seesaw to say, well, this is a bond at a discounted price. And they tell me 89.5, which in bond speak, you should definitely know that's 89.5% par. So that's 895. And we have a coupon that's given to us, the nominal yield coupon, fixed or stated rate of return, which is given information. And I should know from my teeter-totter that I can now eliminate a couple answers here. And let's talk about the answers that just based on this simple version of a teeter-totter, I just go boom. There's my yield to maturity, something greater than 6. Or excuse me, there's my current yield. Let's label that. Let's get a smaller thing here. This is going to be current yield. And this is going to be yield to maturity. So I know the yield to maturity is here. And then I know the yield to call is going to be higher still. And so the yield to call is going to be up in here. And let's label that. And so, boy, anytime you get one of these kind of questions, I highly recommend you get your, flat line where it represents par, get your teeter fired up. Now, the reason that's helpful, now if we go back by process of elimination, I can get this to a 50-50 pretty quickly. What I mean by that is we can now look at the answer set and say, okay, well, it can't be 5.5% because that would be a bond at a premium. And it can't be 6. Now, one thing you are held accountable for is to be able to do current yield. And so I should be able to do current yield. And current yield could be informative to me because if I do current yield, what I'm about to do here, I'm going to figure out what the current yield is here. Oop. And let's see. So the current yield is going to be what the bond pays us. The bond pays us $60. How did I get the $60? I got 6% based on par. So that's going to give us $60 in annual interest by what it costs us. So we're going to take the $60 in annual interest. Let's get a bigger font here. And we're going to divide that by what it costs us. And so, by the way, if you can't remember what to do on the test, you always should divide. But if you can't remember what to divide, take the first number divided by the second number. So here's my $60. And the bond cost me $895, the current market price. And I'm terrible at arithmetic. So anytime they offer me a calculator, I'm going to say thank you very much. And so 60 divided by 895 is a current yield of 6.7. Now, as we said, that's kind of helpful because once we get that current yield of 6.7, which is testable, I mean, you have to be able to do current yield. So once I get this current yield here of 6.7, pretty helpful because now I can eliminate 6.7 as the answer. Because remember, they asked me yield to call, and I just figured out that it can't be 6.7. It's got to be something higher than 6.7. By the way, this would be the same kind of a process. And the report that this, a couple of these students have sent me is they had to ask what the yield maturity yield to call is. And really what I told them is that's not true. What they're really doing is hoping you'll freak out. It's a camouflage version of the teeter-totter, right? They're not actually asking you to calculate yield to call in this. Thank God, right? If you thought that's what you had to do, you might freak out. But now that we've eliminated, now we know it's choice D. By the way, you're not going to have to calculate that, but if it was the yield to maturity, it would be something between 6.7 and 7.7. So the answer to this question is 7.7. Again, what I'm illustrating here is that you don't have to be able to do yield to call or yield to maturity. What you need to be able to do is know the relationship. Okay, so let's just look at a fancy version of this. So I'm just going to show you a fancier version of the slide, right? So let me clean it up. And so here's our teeter-totter in all its glory. I'll link in the comment section. I'll pin a comment with my 15-minute carve-out or 10-minute carve-out on the teeter-totter. There's several narrative long bond lectures. Ford bond, not James bond, which is over an hour or so. There's a muni bond lecture. There's underwriting muni bonds. There's lots of bonds lectures, but there's a smaller carve-out I'll put in there. So we had determined that this was a bond at a discount. So let me get rid of that. We had determined that this was a bond at a discount. So now in terms of our teeter-totter, we know that we're going to be using that line. And we were given the nominal yield of 6%. As we said, we're going to have to be able to do the current yield. And we know that the yield to maturity and yield to call will be higher than that current yield. And so what you need to do, again, is take a strategic pause and say, what can I figure out, or what am I held accountable to figure out? And you are held accountable to know that that's going to be something more than 6. And that math is testable. So we took 60 divided by 895. We found out the current yield was 6.7. So that means that the yield to maturity is something higher, and the yield to call is something higher still. Now, good news for us, right? We only had one answer, and that answer was 7.7. So anyways, hope you found that helpful. Remember, yard, inch by inch, your Series 7 is a cinch. Yard by yard, your Series 7 is hard. It looks like I don't have my studio lights on. Alexa, turn on studio light. There we go. And I'll see you for the next time. I hope you're having a good weekend of studying hard. If you have any questions or comments, send them my way. Bye-bye.